Really appreciate you being here. I am Gary Lilly, Superintendent of Schools, and very much appreciate you coming out and for this presentation. So we are here to talk about the rezoning initiative. Just to be completely clear, like nothing is finalized at this point, and we will get into all of this. But like Mr. Jones has already talked to you about, this is a conversation, this is a dialogue, because our rezoning committee has forwarded a proposal. But at this point, we want to hear your perspective, and we've got multiple ways for you to do that. One is the pink card that you have in your hand. We will try to answer. Those are questions. The other is if you'll take a screenshot or put your camera on this QR code, then it will take you to a form that you can do comments on. If you don't have that kind of phone or you can't get the QR code to work, you can also go to our website. Under the About link, we've got a rezoning page, and it's got all of our current information there, and we try to keep that updated. So like the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, as we see more and more questions come in of a certain type, then we will go ahead and add an FAQ to that, another entry. So you may want to check back there often, but it also has a link there. So if you can't get this to work, you can get a link there. I will tell you that at the point the board has to consider this, the rezoning initiative, at public board meetings, not work sessions, but at public board meetings, there is a comment period. My suggestion to you is, if I were you, I would put all my perspectives into the comment field or into the comment form, because the public comment at board meetings are limited. We can't be there, all night long, and people usually have a lot to say. So unfortunately, that means we have to limit the amount of time that you can speak. There's no limit on this form. So you can take your time, you can reason out everything that you want to convey to the board, and all those comments are going to be shared with the Board of Education. So be sure to take advantage of this form. It's hopefully that'll be a good venue for you to express your perspective, again, that we want to hear. All right, so tonight's agenda, if I don't get feedback here. So they said, do you want a podium or you just want to walk across the stage? And I said, oh, give me a podium. So immediately I start walking across the stage. So I'm going to use this, but it allows me to use the pointer here, and I want to point at a few things. So our purpose for this evening, we want to review the rezoning. I think my battery just went out. The rezoning policy and process, the committee's proposal, as well as answer any questions that you may have. So let's jump into the policy. How does this work? So you'll see the quotation marks. This is directly from our board policy. So the superintendent will conduct an annual review of student data, facility conditions, and programmatic utilization to ascertain the need for new or modified school attendance zones. A couple of things that we wanted to point out. Annual review. So do you know that we look at this every single year to say, where's our enrollment, where are the kids coming from, do we need to make adjustments? Now we don't do it every year, thankfully, because we know that people love their schools and they don't want to have to change. You know who else it's not pleasant for? It's not pleasant for us to have to go through this process. Unfortunately, it is necessary when the enrollment gets out of balance. So that's, again, we review annually, but it's been a while since we have done a rezoning effort. The other thing I want to explain is programmatic utilization. So this is different than capacity. Capacity basically means how many rooms do you have in a school? Theoretically, how many students could you get in every room? That's your capacity. Programmatic or utilization is different because every room is not a classroom full of kids. We have special education classrooms, we have OT, PT services, we have ESL services, we have lots of things that we provide our students. That's one of the reasons why Collierville Schools is such a great school district. We have lots of programming for students. That programming all takes space. So our utilization is different than capacity. So I just want to point that out. And we'll refer to these things later. If by a majority vote the board recommends rezoning, the board shall direct the superintendent to commence the rezoning planning process. So just to be clear, the board authorizes rezoning, but it's my duty to actually conduct the process. So the board, based on a study by a national firm, we'll talk about that a little bit more too, but based on their recommendations and the results of that growth study, they did authorize me on July 18th to start the rezoning process. So that's what we did. So the superintendent may appoint a zoning committee to review rezoning proposals for consideration. Any such committee may consist of representatives from the following. I'm not going to spend too much time on what the policy says because I want to share with you the actual roles that we have on the rezoning committee. The superintendent shall hold a public meeting to discuss any rezoning proposals and provide an opportunity for public input. That's what this is tonight. Notice the policy says hold a public meeting. We are genuinely interested in your perspective and what you have to say. So we said, let's not just do one meeting, let's do a couple of meetings in case somebody can't make it to the first. So we've got 2 meetings and we've got opportunities for feedback, which we've already talked about, and again, all of that is going to be shared with our board members prior to the board meeting where they will have to vote on this. The board shall take action on the superintendent's recommendation as soon as possible. The recommendation must be voted on by the school board. So again, what we present to the school board is a recommendation, a proposal. The board may adopt it, they may reject it, or the board might say, we're going to change it up a little bit. All of that is their prerogative. So the school board vote is scheduled for December 12th. That is the December board meeting. And if approved, this part's important, if approved, it becomes effective next year. I have seen a comment or two that has said basically, middle of the year is a terrible time to switch schools. We agree completely. That would be a terrible time to switch schools. So this would not go into effect until next school year. In fact, when that study came out and we were talking about it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that was over the summer, and we tried to calm everybody to say nothing's going to happen August 23. So we will take an entire year to go through the process, consider perspectives, and if changes are made, it will be in 24-25. All right, so again, according to the policy, reasons to rezone. One is to equalize enrollment when overcrowding exists. So that could be one reason. Or to plan for anticipated student population growth or decline. Or to promote the efficient use of transportation services. Or to modify school feeder patterns. There are actually 2 reasons that we are going down this road, and that's for numbers 1 and 2, to equalize enrollment, because we do have spots where overcrowding exists, and to plan for anticipated student population growth. So again, by the policy, some things that we've got to keep in mind, we've got to consider. This was part of the responsibility of the rezoning committee to consider educational opportunities afforded to students, capacity of each school, geographic location of each school. But there are some things that were not in the policy for us to consider. One is the historic attendance patterns of specific neighborhoods. So to say, well, all of my kids have always gone to that school. That's not one of the things we take into consideration. Personal attendance preferences of students or parents. We know people love their schools. That's awesome. We want people to love their schools. But if we took into account where do you love to go to school, then pretty soon we don't have attendance boundaries. So that's just not practical. And the potential impact on home values. Now, I would say, I know that we have seen some comments about this. I'm not a realtor, I don't know for sure, but I would say, I would doubt there's too much impact, because one of the things that we're so blessed with in this district, all of our schools are great. It's not like we've got bad schools. So that is a plus. That is something that we are blessed with. All right, so that is the policy. Let's get into the rezoning process. How have we gotten from the board saying, okay, go forth and come up with a rezoning initiative, to tonight's meeting? So the timeline actually starts in 2022. So in July 2022, school boards authorized MGT Consulting. MGT Consulting is a national company. They do like growth studies and this type of thing across the country. That's what they do. They authorized them to conduct a district growth and facility study for the purpose of long-range planning. If you've lived in Collierville any amount of time, you know that people want to be here. Our town continues to grow. That's a good thing. It's nice that people want to be here because things are going well, but that presents challenges. So as we try to think, how are we going to deal with those challenges, we brought in a consulting firm to say, help us with this. And so almost a year later, they presented the results of their study to the Board of Education, along with their data-informed recommendations to address ongoing issues of enrollment growth and building capacity. So I'll be honest with you, I have seen consultants that seem like they've got kind of a template, and they just fill it in, they fill in different things depending upon who they're talking to. I'll tell you, this company did not do that. They came on site, and they stayed on site for multiple days. They came, they went back to wherever they're from, they'd come back. They came into every one of our facilities. They did a facility study as far as the condition of our schools. That's really not part of what we're talking about tonight, but it's great information. But they talked to our planner for the school system. They talked to the planner for the town. They took a look at the developments that are on the books. They really got a lot of data. And I'll be honest with you, their recommendations were not what I initially thought. Again, I don't really do this kind of work, but it's not what I initially thought would happen. So they collected lots of data, they looked at it, and on July 18th, the board unanimously directed me to commence the rezoning planning process. So let's look at the roles of the actual people on the rezoning committee. We tried to get a good cross-section and get a lot of people who could offer good perspectives on the rezoning committee. So of course I was on there, Assistant Superintendent Jones was on there, we had a school board member liaison, one school board member, shared services planner, chief of operations, chief academic officer, chief of special education, chief of student services. We had a couple of principals on there, shared services transportation supervisor, transportation consultant, student services supervisor, student safety specialist, and public information officer. Excuse me. So that was those were the district personnel. And then we tried to get some folks from the community to participate, which included Collierville's town planner, the Collierville vice mayor, and a PTA representative from every school. So this is just not 9 with 5 from one school and 4 from another, but spread out across all the schools. And we met across 3 different dates, and across each of those meetings, we talked about all kinds of things. I will tell you the charge of the Board of Education is for us to make one proposal. And we've talked about, we've talked about a ton of different possible options, which we don't have time to go over 3 meetings worth of those options. But our charge is to bring the board a single proposal. So that is what the committee has forwarded to this point. So to give you an idea of how much our enrollment has grown, the August 2014, after the district was established, we had 7,900 students. Fast forward to this year, August of this year, we are up to 9,400 students. The projection in 5 more years is 10,500 students. So again, hopefully you'll see that you need to plan for this growth. You don't want to wait until it's here. Everybody's overcrowded, classes are too full, there's no place for programming, and now what are you going to do? So that's the reason we have taken a year to try to plan. That's the reason last year we could see it coming, you can see it coming, you see our town growing. We said, let's get some information so that we can make the best decisions that we can. This is not the first time that we have had to address growth in our town or for the school system. So in 2016, we rezoned 26 students from Bailey Station to Sycamore Elementary. We rezoned 35 students from Schilling Farms, at that time a middle school, Schilling Farms to Collierville Middle. 2018, of course, is when this building came online, the new high school. And we relocated Schilling Farms, again, which was a middle, to the, we changed it to West Collierville Middle School on Bahalia Road, which was the previous high school, of course. 2018, we opened Schilling Farms Elementary by rezoning 413 students from Sycamore Elementary. We're going to talk a little bit about a survey result here in a minute that shows that there's very much support for building new facilities. Keep in mind, though, when you build a school, you got to populate the school from somewhere. So that does not prevent you from rezoning. You still have to rezone if you build a school. And that's what happened when we opened Schilling Farms Elementary. We also rezoned at that same year 115 students from Collierville Middle to West Collierville Middle. Now this last one's got nothing with rezoning necessarily, but we are constructing, if you look at the wings on the back of the high school, we are constructing 17 additional classrooms, and that will accommodate 2 aviation labs and additional growth here. So we are already, just a little interesting point, Collierville High School is already the largest high school in the state of Tennessee. It was built to accommodate up to 3,500 students in the commons areas. At the time, and this was planned to save money, but at the time, it was only constructed to house up to 3,000 students for classroom space. This wing expansion evens up the number of students that we can accommodate in the classrooms with the number of students we can accommodate in the commons areas. And also, just an interesting fact, we just crested 3,000 students this year here at the Collierville High School. So we're growing. Now, MGT, some of their findings. Now, before I talk too much about this, I'm going to tell you something they told us over and over again. This projections are a little bit like a weather report. You know, it's looking out tomorrow. We've got pretty high confidence that the weather person is going to give us accurate information. But if you go to weather.com and you look at the 10-day forecast, what's the chances that 10-day forecast is going to be correct? It's kind of hit and miss. So that's what they told us. Looking 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out on the projection, you're probably pretty close. And the reason is because developers have to go through a whole process to be approved. They've got to present to the town, they've got to get permits, they've got to do lots of preliminary work before they can start hammering 2x4s. So looking close out, the study, they felt like they had a pretty good handle on what was going to happen. But they said developers, it used to be different years ago, but developers don't really telegraph what they're going to do far out anymore. So this is their best guess without knowing what developers will do. And if you think that developing maybe just halts, then at some point kids start aging out and all that kind of stuff. So in any case, if you look at this, again, this is our enrollment this year, August of this year. Projection for 2029 is 10,500, and then they've actually got it 10 years out. They've got it dropping just a wee little bit. But again, they told us over and over again, don't put a whole lot of stock in the 10-year out because that can change. So based on that, they came up with an efficiency rate for each of our elementary schools. Again, I'm going to talk about the difference between capacity. Keep in mind that is the maximum number, basically, of butts and seats that you could shoehorn into classes. That's not really what we want for programming. So we call it a utilization factor. We're saying, well, if you had 90% of the capacity, then that would give you room for programming, for all the different things that you want to be able to do and services to offer for students. So the programmatic capacity is less than just the straight capacity. So here's our current enrollment, and keep in mind this was back when MGT did the study. Current enrollment, the difference in the efficiency rate. So they came up with the efficiency rates and they kind of color-coded them there to draw your attention to them. But what we're shooting for is like right around the 90%. You can see that Bailey Station is a bit over. Collierville is pretty close. Crosswind is way over. That's why they're in yellow. Schilling Farm's pretty close right now. Sycamore Elementary, way low. So you can be inefficient either having too many kids, which causes problems, or having too few, which is really the situation at Sycamore. Now, I will tell you, because we don't have room for some classes elsewhere, we've kind of loaded them into Sycamore. We would like to be able to spread some of those classes out elsewhere in the district. And then Tamyra is also a little on the low side. So MGT also did a community survey. They presented the information. We sent out a survey link. We got, if you look at this, I said, what's this mean? That either 1,931 to 1,961. So we had a maximum of 1,961 respondents, but not everyone answered every question. So that's why it varies on there. But as you can see, and this is probably worth noting, this was not a ranking. This was not pick your first choice, second choice, third choice. It could be possible somebody might strongly agree or strongly disagree with all 6 of these choices. But what was clear is that a lot of people supported additions to existing buildings to ease overcrowding of schools and to accommodate future growth. It's easier said than done at some buildings because some of our buildings are landlocked. There's no place to add on. There was very much support for construction of new buildings to solve overcrowding of schools and to accommodate future growth. Again, if you build new buildings, you still have to rezone because kids have to come from somewhere. But possibly the bigger problem with that is selling it to taxpayers. Number one, the school board, if the school board said, yeah, let's just build a new school. And I said that my initial thought was different than what MGT actually recommended. Going into this, prior to them getting here, I honestly believed that we would probably have to build an elementary school on the southwest side of town. The problem is, if you go back here, MGT's findings said, you don't really need a new school. You've got the space, you just have the kids in the wrong spots. So if you balance that out, you don't have to build a school. So again, think about selling new construction. Basically, the board would have to go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and say, hey, we want to build a new school. They don't like to have to raise taxes because taxpayers are not happy with that. And so their question is going to be, you don't have enough space? Well, it turns out, we kind of do have enough space. So there was some support from this survey for rezoning the elementary schools to balance forecasted enrollment among the 6 elementary schools. What this told us loud and clear, there was hardly any support for reconfiguring the grades. Like, I remember a lot of people were like mad we even asked. We're like, oh, we're checking. Hey, we heard you. Thank you. So, These are the recommendations after this year-long study by MGT. Here's what they came. Notice these are quotation marks. This comes straight from their report. That report is available on our rezoning website, so you can go read it for yourself. And there's actually a ton of interesting information in there. If you've not done that, I encourage you to do so. But they said, one recommendation, evaluate and realign elementary attendance boundaries to balance current enrollment and projected enrollments. Balancing enrollment through boundary adjustments makes sense, especially considering the projected enrollment growth in the Bailey Station and Schilling Farms attendance areas. Keep this in mind because of the projected growth. You'll see in a minute that this proposal that the rezoning committee has forwarded leaves a little room in those areas, exactly like the MGT recommended. Build a new addition to Crosswind to increase capacity. That's something, again, the board has not voted on this, but they know we're talking about it. We think we should, but this option would have to be partnered with boundary considerations of the district in an effort to meet the growth that is forecast overall. We'll talk about Crosswind here in a minute. Research the possible procurement of a parcel of land suitable for future school construction. Although the need to construct a new school during the 10-year planning period is unlikely, the district may want to evaluate land procurement now to obtain the most advantageous price and location for the future. What that tells us basically is you better get some land while you can, because it's going. And at some point in the future, you're not going to be able to get land. No, you don't need a school now, but at some point in the future, you may, and you need some place to put that school. Zoning recommendations. Adjust the boundary between Tamyra Oaks and Collierville Elementary to increase Tamyra and decrease Collierville Elementary. Adjust the boundary between Collierville Elementary and Bailey Station to increase Collierville Elementary and decrease Bailey Station. So you're kind of shifting people kind of to the east. Adjust the attendance boundary between Sycamore and Schilling Farms to increase enrollment at Sycamore and decrease enrollment at Schilling Farms, and evaluate the need to adjust the attendance boundary between Crosswind Elementary and Tamyra Oaks to decrease Crosswind and increase enrollment at Tamyra. So I have seen some comments where folks have said, you know, it's not that bad. Let's just let it ride. They're fine. The schools are fine. Not really. So let's take a look at Crosswind. Again, their current utilization is already 98%. So we asked the principals, tell us some of the challenges that you're having at the school with space. Are you having challenges? And the response was, yeah, we are. So at Crosswind, we got 2 gifted teachers sharing a classroom. We have 2 special education teachers sharing a classroom. The occupational therapists and PT share a classroom. Technology staff share a closet off the music room. One school counselor works in the bookstore while the other works in a storage closet in the main office. One Tennessee All-Core tutor works in the library media storage closet while the other works in the textbook storeroom. Both the school psychologist and the school social worker work in small spaces near the stage in the cafeteria. One on one side of the stage, one on the other side. There is no pre-K classroom and no calming room for emotionally disturbed students. They would love to have a pre-K classroom. No room, no space. Let's look at Bailey. So the current utilization, it's a little high, but it's not terrible. It's 92.2. But the projected utilization fall of 24 is 98%. Fall after that is 101%. Current challenges. The occupational therapist, speech therapist, and physical PT all share one classroom. Technology staff and the school resource officer share one classroom as a joint office. The tutors work in a media storage closet while the other works in the librarian's office. There are 9 sections of 3rd grade, but only 7 specialty classrooms, which requires LAMPS classes to be further subdivided. If you wonder what LAMPS is, that's library, art, music, PE, and STEM. There's no designated PLC, that's professional learning community, PLC meeting space, and there's again, no calming room for emotionally disturbed students. So Schilling also is actually current utilization even a little better, but that's where a lot of the development's going to be. So the projected utilization fall of 25 is 100%, fall of 28 is 119%. Currently, there are still issues. 3 ESL teachers share one classroom. 2 special ed teachers share one classroom. 2 academic interventionists share a classroom. There's no designated space for the school psychologist to administer required screenings. There's no designated PLC meeting space. There is no empty classroom in the building. So one of the things we do at the beginning of every year is look to see who shows up. And of course, we have an idea. Whoever was in 2nd grade last year is probably going to be in 3rd grade next year. But not always. Sometimes people move out, sometimes people move in, and so sometimes you kind of have to wait until like the first day of school to see who shows up, to count your numbers. The state has some maximum numbers that we cannot exceed. I will tell you in Collierville, our self-imposed maximum number is a bit less than that, because we believe that there's value in not overloading a classroom. So to the extent that we can keep class sizes small, we think students learn better. That is our preference. On the first day of school, once we did all the counts, Schilling Farms needed another 5th grade teacher. We were willing to give them another 5th grade teacher. We had no classrooms to put another 5th grade in. So that's some of the things that we're kind of trying to resolve, kind of solve here. Crosswind. You know, could we shove a few more students in their class spaces? Yeah, maybe, but they already don't have programming areas. So we are talking about doing an addition there if the board approves it. We would like to add, I think, 12 classrooms. Mr. Daughtery, wherever, 12 classrooms?
Yes, sir.
So that will help with programming, but also with space issues and all that. Best case scenario. And again, I've got a couple of board members here, and we haven't taken it to them for a vote yet, but assuming they vote for it, best case scenario, 2 years to actually do that addition. But they need relief now for programming. All right, so what are the goals of this rezoning committee that we put together? Well, it was to provide a little relief for Collierville Elementary, hopefully immediately. Provide space for projected growth at Bailey Station and Schilling Farms, and to balance the current and future enrollment at our schools. So here is the proposal. Committee recommends the rezoning of 340 students in 5 geographical areas through adjustments of the attendance boundaries of all 6 of the district's elementary schools. So that I just point out what you're looking at here. The blue is Bailey. The purple is Crosswind. This tan color is Collierville E. This is Tamyra over here. This is Sycamore, and this is Schilling. So the areas in red are the proposed rezoning areas. So let's look at those a little bit closer. And again, we also try not to like overdo it. Yeah, we wanted to accomplish those things. We wanted to balance enrollment, but we didn't really want to, go too big because we know it causes anxiety. So let's look at Crosswind. To provide a measure of immediate relief to Crosswind, the committee recommends that 54 students residing north of Powell Road, south. If you've taken a look at the rezoning, we originally said south of Frank Road, and then it crossed our mind that Frank Road really doesn't cross Byhalia, so we changed that. South of Winford, Burlington, east of Byhalia, and west of Cox Park, to be rezoned from Crosswind Elementary to Collierville Elementary School. This bottom statement is something you're going to see on every one of these. That is, the area proposed for rezoning is contiguous with the current Collierville Elementary attendance boundaries. When you look at rezoning, it makes sense that you want the areas that you rezone contiguous to the zone you're sending people to. You wouldn't want like a kind of like a gerrymandered block here that's not surrounded by the same zone. To allow space for projected growth at Bailey Station, the committee recommends that 67 students residing north of Poplar, south of Powell, east of Market Boulevard, and west of New Byhalia Road be rezoned from Bailey to Collierville Elementary. To allow space for projected growth at Schilling, the committee recommends that 106 students residing north of Holmes, south of Shelby Drive, east of Forest Hill Irene Road, and west of Fleming Road be rezoned from Schilling Farms to Sycamore Elementary. To allow space at Collierville Elementary for the 54 rezoned students from Crosswind, the committee recommends that 50 students residing north of Highway 72, south of South Street, east of Sycamore Road, and west of Center Street be rezoned from Collierville Elementary to Sycamore. To allow space at Collierville Elementary for the 67 rezoned students from Bailey, the committee recommends that 63 students residing north of Valleywood Drive and Powell Road, south of Harper's Ferry Road, and east of Yorktown Road, and west of Collierville Arlington be rezoned from Collierville Elementary to Terra Oaks. All right, so if all those moves were made, what would the effect of that be? I'm so appreciative to our planner who the committee would look at, well, if you did this, if you did that, if you look at this area, if you look at that area, and it was her job to say, okay, where are all the students, and how many are we talking about, and how does it all shake out? So she was extremely helpful in that. So if all those moves were made, it balances really well. It actually puts every school under that 90% utilization rate that we're kind of shooting for. Notice it leaves a little additional room at Bailey Station and right much additional room at Schilling to accommodate the future development and the future growth. So this aligns really well with the MGT recommendations. So the committee talked about making additional recommendations to the board. Again, it'll be up to the board whether they accept, reject, or change these recommendations. But we said, the current fourth graders, let's give them the option to remain at their schools for the fifth grade exit year as transfer students, and to avoid having to double up on buses, which cost a lot. Parents would be required to transport children. But basically, fifth graders next year could stay, again, if the board adopts this proposal. All students in grades pre-K through 3 should attend their newly zoned schools for the next school year. So going back to, this is the teacher in me. We tell you what we're going to try to do. We show you how we get there, and then we take a look. Did we accomplish what we were hoping to? Provides Crosswind Elementary a measure of immediate relief. Yes, it would. Allow space for projected growth in the Bailey Station and Schilling Farms attendance zones? Yes, it would. Does it balance current and future school enrollments? Yes, it does. So I'm going to get into a few things. We've heard a lot of comments, really, and there's some misinformation out there, and so this is a good opportunity to try to kind of clear that up. We want to be as factual as possible. While I'm talking about this, if any of you have additional question cards, if you'll raise those really high, then our folks will come around and pick those up so that they can kind of collect those while I'm busting a few myths. All right, so one myth. Not all elementary schools in Collierville are high-performing schools. That is incorrect. If you look at the results from last year's TCAP growth scores, so the way this works, level 5 is the highest level you can achieve. A 3 is at expectations. A 3 means that a student basically grew a year's worth in a year's time. 3 is not bad, really. That's basically expectations. You hope that a student grows a year in a year's time. 5 is exceeding expectations. All of our schools got 5. This goes back to what I said earlier. We're blessed. We don't have bad schools in Collierville. Every school is high quality. Another myth. The district recently completed the rezoning process. My student is being moved again. Well, actually, no. You remember what I said, that we don't really like doing this any more than you like us doing this. It's necessary sometimes. It's been 6 years since we have done a rezoning process. Now, families with older siblings, it's possible that families have been rezoned multiple times, but a child that started in kindergarten is not going to have to be rezoned again because it's been 6 years. If my child's elementary school zone changes, his or her middle school zone will also change. No, we are not looking at rezoning middle schools. So that is not the case. Just because the elementary school zone may change, the middle school zones will remain the same. And the high school zone remains the same. That's one snicker. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder if anybody get it. Rezoning students from one elementary school to another may jeopardize federal funding, namely Title I funds. Not really how that works. The Title I funding comes to the district at the district level, and it does follow economically disadvantaged students. So it's really not dependent upon what happens at the school. It's a district level allocation. Revoking non-resident transfers would render rezoning unnecessary. Not really. Look at these numbers. I will tell you that most of our non-resident transfers come from employees, and that is actually, they are allowed to do that by law. So those are what they are. That is a perk given to educators by the Tennessee legislature years and years and years ago. So we got those folks, and we're okay with that. The non-resident students who are not children of employees, you know, think about the growth that we've had. Well, at one time, we had some space. So as we've had space, we have allowed non-resident transfers. As that space has kind of waned, then we have gotten tighter and tighter and tighter on that. Now, Sycamore, as you saw, has more space than any of the schools. Even this year, we tightened that down to say we will accept non-resident transfers to Sycamore only, that is the only school, and only if they've already got a sibling there. So we're already really tight on non-resident transfers, and you can see just a few here and there. I will tell you, transfers is something that is a year-to-year. It's not guaranteed. It is something that we examine every year, and we'll certainly examine that in context of rezoning and all that, but we're just not talking about a ton of numbers. If my child is rezoned to Terra Oaks, he or she will have to walk or bike across Collierville Arlington Road. I can definitely understand why that would be a concern. We would not encourage that. We don't want that. We will send a bus to pick up those students. Some neighborhoods, namely those not rezoned in either 2018 or 24, are somehow exempt from rezoning consideration. Also not really true. Again, this is something that we have to look at every year. We try not to have to do it every year, but we do look at it every year. And yeah, nobody's really exempt from that. Now, if your neighbor is the school, you're probably gonna be okay. You're probably not gonna be asked to rezone. But if your house is close to a rezone line, you could be. Okay, we are to the question part. I'm going to give Mr. Jones a microphone. I'm going to go back to the podium and use this mic. Mr. Jones.
Thank you. And we do have a stack of questions. Some of these are simple yes or no. Some of these have actually been addressed in the presentation, in the myth-busting portion of the presentation, and we'll try not to do duplicates. We'll stay and try to answer as many of these questions as we can. If we can't answer, some of them are data questions, and I don't want to give you the wrong number. We'll get those answers for you, and we'll email you the answer at the email address that you provided. So I'll read the question. We'll let Dr. Lilly address it, and if there's anything that needs to be added, we have several of our executive staff members here. We have our planner here as well. We'll try to get the answers to it. So, Dr. Lilly, first question. It says, can current students and siblings not stay at their current school, and this only affect the new households? And I think you kind of addressed that in the recommendation.
I'm sorry, I could not.
Oh, sorry.
Could not hear.
Make it over closer to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the question once again, it says, can current students and siblings not stay at their current school, and this only affect new households?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is not part of the plan, not part of the proposal, because the proposal depends upon students moving to the new zones. The concession that the zoning committee did want to make was to allow the fifth graders to stay, the current fourth graders.
It says the proposed rezoning does not indicate the number of students in each area up for rezoning. Could that information please be shared? And I think that was included in the presentation, the numbers of how many students in A, B, C, D, and E were being recommended. That is correct. On the map that was published, the number was not there, but it is in this PowerPoint. And this PowerPoint will be posted on the website tonight, so you'll be able to go in and review this yourself. Why are siblings excluded from the exemption?
Yes. Well, again, because to accomplish the goals that we've had to rebalance the schools, it requires actually moving some students. So that's why siblings are not. Now, it is understood that could be a hassle if you have a fifth grader at one school and then a third grader at a different school. That would be your choice. Keep in mind, the fifth grader does not have to stay. The fifth grader would be eligible to go rezone if that were your choice.
A couple questions. How many 24-25 Collierville Elementary School fifth graders are being rezoned to Terra Oaks? And that's one that I don't know the number off the top of my head. Few. I think that there were fewer than 20 in all the schools that we looked at, and that was one of the reasons why the committee was recommending that those rising fifth graders be allowed to remain at their schools. And then it says, how many of those rezoned fifth graders have siblings in K through 3? Don't have an answer, but our Student Services Department can certainly look into that, and we'll email you the answer. It says, how many years would it take for the overcrowding issue to correct itself if only newly incoming students would have to adhere to the newly proposed school zones? Why can current students not be grandfathered in to reduce the impact on students and their families? I don't know what type of statistical formula it would take to predict the amount of time that it would take to self-correct, but I can also tell you that we do have our policy on attendance zones specifically states that the superintendent will enforce the attendance zones as they are written. So it would take action by the board to allow siblings in those schools to remain, or families that were rezoned to remain. Do you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next is our son is in pre-K SPED class at CES. A change of school will be catastrophic to his progress and potentially set him back. Even his teachers say a move will be a terrible decision. For SPED students, where there'll be special consideration. Well, what I would say, and Dr. Lilly, I said, will add to this, is all students that have an IEP, IEPs are exactly that. They're individualized education programs. As he said, we feel that every one of our schools is exceptional and they can meet the needs of all special ed students. But if an IEP team decision were made that a particular student's needs could only be met at one specific school, then of course that would override any policy decision.
You're doing a great job, Mr. Jones. I'm just going to have a seat. No, you're good. Keep rolling.
What is the logical reasoning for rezoning SFES by adversely affecting well-established single-family residents? I think the fact that they're predicted to hit 119% capacity, we don't have a single empty classroom. We can't take any additional classes. We're already overcrowded. And I was the principal at Schilling Farms when it was a middle school. I have dealt with this space issue before. We had 8 portable classrooms when it was a middle school. We had no storage space, so I'm very familiar with the challenges. There's not room to expand now that we've put in the playgrounds over there. And there's a question that's going to come up about portables. Why can't we just have portable classrooms? The difficulties with portable classrooms, what's required, the electricity, the wiring, the fire alarm system, the concrete pad, the maintenance. It's a very expensive endeavor. The maintenance on those, whether you have to bring those children inside, during inclement weather time. If it's raining, parents complain, why are my children having to go outside? They have to come inside to go to the bathroom. They have to come inside to eat. They have to come inside to go to their lamps classes. Portables are not a decision that we make lightly. That would only be in an extreme case if every one of our schools was so overcrowded that we didn't have an available classroom, or available seats for students, we might look at portable buildings, but that's not the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, that is exactly right. You know, we were thrilled to get rid of the portables over at West that we had for a while.
What are the future implications to the middle school if we get rezoned? As Dr. Lilly just said, there are no plans to rezone the middle schools. MGT saw no reason to even look at middle school rezoning. In fact, the rezoning committee at its first meeting says, we want to leave middle schools alone. The middle school maps are exactly the same. If your current neighborhood is zoned for West Collierville Middle, you will still be zoned for West Collierville Middle, even if your elementary child is rezoned to another school. That's a repeat. Will the middle schools be rezoned in future years?
Oh, well, yeah, so again, that is not on the books for this time. Can we say for sure what will happen in the future? We really can't. So we can't guarantee that forever and ever, but it is not even being discussed for the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean it won't possibly happen.
This question is, what parameters were considered when single-family home subdivisions were included in being rezoned while leaving apartment complexes behind? And we've had this discussion actually going all the way back to our rezoning in 2018. It's not where a child comes from, it's where a child is going that we feel is important, and we don't treat homeowners and apartment dwellers any differently in rezoning considerations. Every family that sacrifices to bring their children to Collierville schools, we're going to give that child equal educational opportunity.
I agree.
Will open transfers be available if you want to keep your child at their current school? You address that.
Probably not.
We have a policy on transfers. And there are certain levels of priority for those transfers, and we did not allow in previous rezonings for elementary school students to remain, except in the case of the opening of Schilling Farms. Because we opened Schilling Farms with exclusively students from Sycamore that was leaving both of those schools under capacity, we did allow those families to make the decision at that time if they wanted to leave their students at a school, because the projection was, even within 10 years, that Sycamore would still be underutilized.
You know, that is something that we do look at on a yearly basis. We have the open transfer window, and we take a look at where the space is. But it is, if this rezoning proposal is adopted, it is not anticipated that we will be in a situation where we would be able to entertain a whole lot of transfers. Is there occasional exceptional case? Occasionally, but not very often.
Questions as, was the census performed? How were the zones decided? How were the number of children per household figured? How many of those were in elementary school? Well, that's beyond my expertise, the science that's involved, but our certified planner, Ms. Jones, as well as the certified planner for the town of Collierville, Mr. Gross, they have access to tremendous databases on birth rates, on death rates, on moving. They have access to census data. Some of it is predictive. We never know, for example, in kindergarten, how many parents are going to choose a private school for kindergarten, a home school, for example, but we have excellent data, and I've been working with Ms. Jones for many years, back in my days as assistant principal and a principal, and her projections are many years spot on with the number of students that are enrolled in our schools.
I will add that even before we convened the rezoning committee, like, there was a lot of work on the front end that we had to do. They've got some just really neat software, but that required that we load the software with the addresses of every single student in our district. But that gives you capabilities to really hone in very carefully when you're looking at sections and how many kids are in each section that you happen to select.
The question says, what impact will rezoning have on the distribution of special ed students per school? Great question, and one that we have been particularly attuned to. In fact, our chief of exceptional children, Ms. Jill Church, is here, and yesterday we had a meeting with all of our principals and went through school by school what the pre-rezoning and post-rezoning numbers would mean for staffing, for classroom needs, et cetera, and can tell you that some schools will be affected slightly more than others. Others will be a complete wash, that maybe they're giving up, say, 3 students that receive speech therapy, but they're getting 3 students that receive speech therapy. So just know that we're very aware of those numbers. We can send you, some data, obviously, without student names attached to those, just to let you know what the specific numbers will be. Let's see. That's a repeat. That's a repeat about transfers. It says, why do you think capacity is not full at schools like Sycamore, Bailey, Crosswind? When this proposed rezone happens, all should be overfilled, and they will be requesting another rezone. Is there no other way to redo the rezoning?
So that's not what we believe, based on the, looking at the numbers and the rezoning proposal. You saw the capacity, I addressed that. That was in the capacity numbers. If the proposal is accepted, then it actually puts the capacity. It basically, where MGT said, you don't really need a school, you've got the space, you just have the kids in the wrong spot, that would put the kids in the right spot, so it would be balanced across schools.
This question, it's 2 parts, is what consideration was taken to account for friendships that are formed during elementary school and will be split up due to the zones of the middle school, as most of Sycamore goes to CMS and Schilling is zoned for WCMS? As we mentioned, I said there's no change to the zones for middle school, so neighborhoods will still remain the same. So I don't know if that gets to the heart of the question, if it means that, of course, several of our elementary schools are split, whereas some go to one middle school, some go to the other middle school, and by changing elementary schools, maybe you'll be in the smaller number of that, but we're all educators. We all love children. We know that these are formative years for folks, but we have to balance what is the advantage of being in an overcrowded classroom in an overcrowded school versus making a small change. Just a personal anecdote, I attended 3 different elementary schools growing up, and I made great friends at every school, and am Facebook friends to this day at 55 years of age with people that I went to elementary school with at all 3 schools. So I don't think that making a change in elementary school is automatically a detriment, to a child's future.
I would agree. My parents have lived in the same spot since I was born, and I was also rezoned in 5th grade and had some wonderful friendships come from that.
What implications are made for families who have existing in-district transfers? Will those families be moved back to their zone district? You touched on this a little bit, Dr. Lilly.
Again, we look at zoning or transfer rather, as a year-to-year decision, and so we will definitely be looking at that.
It says Schilling Forest Elementary is showing 59 students enrolled who are not zoned to the school. Other than teachers, children with those counts be eliminated before rezoning residential areas to accommodate growing or new enrollments. I don't know where that number came from to say 59, because I don't think that jibed with what we saw here. I don't know if that came from our student services department or from the school itself, but obviously when Schilling Farms first opened 6 years ago, it was under enrolled, so we did take some out-of-district transfers, so there may be some that are being allowed to age out, maybe in the upper grades, 4th or 5th. And as we already mentioned, teachers, children are, of course, allowed to enroll in our particular schools. But the numbers that you saw up there, and I can't quote them off the top of my head, but we verified those with our Student Services Department. Very few.
I think 9.
9 out-of-district transfers at Schilling Farms. Why are students being disrupted when life is returning to normalcy after COVID? Once again, because we're out of space in some of our schools, as we mentioned at Crosswind. I mean, when we're having to put guidance counselors in closets and in bookstores because there's not space, That has implications for privacy, that has implications for the delivery of service. We were just at Crosswind today, as a matter of fact, celebrating their 30th birthday. Over there in a room, I spoke to Miss Chisholm. I said, wow, this is the music room. It doesn't look like any music room I've ever been in. Well, it had at one time been a computer lab. So it was a computer lab that was converted into a music room when the computer lab, when desktop computers vanished and we went to iPads. But just going around and looking at every single nook and cranny there is utilized. And when the principal is saying, I don't know, I guess I'm going to have to put a partition in my office to allow the psychologist to come in and test students for giftedness or for an IEP. It's a desperate situation that's there.
While I was there, students started coming in. I thought, they're going to perform for us. And they got their instruments, and then they left. So I'm not 100% sure where they went, but yes, there's a lack space.
It says on the proposed rezoning map, it appears that all affected areas will be eligible for buses to schools except Zone E. Do you have proposed safety measures in place for children who will have to walk across Carver-Arlington?
Yes.
As we have already addressed that, no student will walk or bike across Carver-Arlington Road. Every student that lives west of Carver-Arlington will be provided bus transportation morning and afternoon. Why does the proposal involve so many changes to CES when the research barely talks about CES? The main schools that were mentioned were Schilling, Terra Oaks, Sycamore, Bailey, Crosswind, and Schilling Farms. CES was never mentioned in the report. Well, as you looked at the recommendations, actually the recommendation said we would need to move students out of Carville E to Terra to make room for those students coming from, for example, from Bailey. So the geographic location of Carville E being more or less kind of in the middle of town just makes it ripe for that eastward movement.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, if this rezoning passes, will be an exception process allowing students and families to stay in their previously zoned schools. I think we already talked about that. This is all governed by policy. We'll make some recommendations to the board, but ultimately it'll be the board's decision on any exceptions to that policy. It says the plan was devised by a consulting company in Tampa. They provide an answer, but not necessarily the best answer. Will citizens' opinions truly affect the outcome? This is why we're here. We're here, as required by the board, to take feedback. Every one of your comments will be shared with every single board member. Board members will communicate with us and say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? If we didn't want feedback, we wouldn't be here. The board wants to know feedback. But as we talked about the primary factors for rezoning, I mean, we look at geographic location, we look at capacity, we look at educational opportunity. Things we don't look at by policy and have never looked at in all of my 30 years in Shelby County, whether it was legacy Shelby County schools, the unified Shelby County, or in Collierville, are things like historic attendance or personal preferences. Those are just not authorized by our policy. Why not flow new enrollments to Sycamore Elementary so that current students don't get disrupted? And I believe what this is saying is, so if you have a apartment complex, for example, or even a single-family residency that pops up, say, in the west part of the Schilling Farms attendance zone, can you not send those students to Sycamore? And the answer is geographic location is the primary consideration, and if the attendance boundary is not contiguous, that's not something that we as a district would consider. Have you considered placing transfer students where there is room, or there will be room, as opposed to moving students who are zoned to their school?
So we have already addressed that transfers are looked at on a year-to-year basis.
Says how many students are projected to be enrolled at SFES in August of 2024. I don't want to give you the incorrect number. It's available in the MGT report. We'll get that number for you, but I think the fall 24 projection would be 100% capacity is what's predicted for Schilling Farms Elementary School. What is the possibility that the school property West Collierville will become a K-8 school? This is needed. I think as Dr. Lilly said,
Yes, so remember the survey where we heard loud and clear that reconfiguration of grades was like not popular among our parents?
was an audit of space utilization conducted at schools prior to rezoning consideration?
What was that?
Was an audit of space utilization conducted at schools prior to rezoning?
That is correct. That's what MGT did.
MGT conducted that. Our planner as well with our chief of operations every year does a utilization study of the space and makes recommendations based upon that audit. Says we want to be included in Wynwood Farms, that is our neighborhood, but we are blessed with Greenview community, which is being rezoned. Don't think that's a question. My son is special ed and would have difficulty with transition. Will SPED students be allowed to receive an exception and remain at their current schools?
We've addressed that.
Where was the notification of rezoning? When you searched addresses for the school, there was or is no notice of a possible change?
I don't know that I understand the question.
I'm not certain of that question when it says where was the notice of rezoning. And if I can only interpret it this way, if you're saying, well, if we had known that we were possibly to be rezoned, we wouldn't have bought our house in this particular neighborhood. We have received that online, said our realtor promised us we would never be rezoned. Well, I can tell you about realtors and lawyers, and people are going to tell you what you want to hear so that they can make the sale. I had a realtor come and see me at the central office last week and said, can you guarantee me that this particular neighborhood will never be rezoned? And I said, no, I can't possibly tell you that's not going to happen.
We have attempted to be transparent. This is an attempt to be transparent. We've got the policy, the MGT study. We tried to be as public as we could with all of that. We've sent out Parent Square messages notifying folks. So we want to be transparent because we want your input.
If we provide our own transportation, can our kids stay where they are? As we've already kind of shown, for example, at a school like Crosswind that's already at 98% utilization, to allow the students to stay there would not solve their utilization problems. For a school like Schilling Farms that's predicted to hit 100% utilization that doesn't have an empty classroom, to allow students to remain, in addition to the organic growth, we wouldn't be able to provide the services that are necessary for students at that school. So my 2 students enrolled at CES can bike or walk, so not have to cross any major intersections. How would they bike or walk to school when they must cross Collierville-Arlington Road, because we've already addressed that.
Yeah.
This is just wanting to know which zone they're actually in. We can answer that one by email. Why are we not having an open forum for discussion, or alternatively having a way to publicly share feedback?
So this is a way to share your feedback with all these comments. Again, there will be an open forum at the board meeting. This is the better way, in my opinion. That's ultimately up to you. But because this gives you the opportunity, the little QR code, or you go to the website and click on the form, gives you the opportunity to say as much as you want, and those are going to be shared with the board. But there will be a public forum at the board meeting where it is voted on. Okay,
I am very disappointed. And unfortunately, my question was not read in the entirety, and the core issue that I had represented in that was not addressed. You tried to misrepresent what I said by saying that I was concerned about only apartment students being at Schilling, but that was not my core concern. My core concern was that it's the newest school of Collierville Schools, and our PTA is just now well established. You are taking away our entire PTA, and any parent here knows how important a PTA is.
Okay.
Working both as staff and a parent.
Well, thank you for those comments, and we will take that under advisement.
If this is truly genuine, opportunity to provide feedback, I am requesting that the next meeting that we are all here together, that you allow us that opportunity. Similar to the meetings before we moved to Collierville, I understand there were community meetings discussing COVID, and everybody had the opportunity to speak 3 minutes at the podium. That is what I was hoping for tonight. That is what I felt like I needed to do as a parent who has a lot of
Okay, thank you. Got it. Thank you for your comments, appreciate it.
Thank you. If I could just respond, we have 26 members of the committee. They're not all here, and not all school board members are here. The only way to ensure that every member of the rezoning committee and every member of the board hears your concern is to submit it electronically. That's the only way.
So we will talk about those things. Thank you. Let's continue on working.
What is the reason for pushing to rezone elementary schools when none are at capacity?
Say that again?
What is the reason for pushing to rezone elementary schools when none are at capacity?
So because we want to try to accomplish those balanced enrollment and the things that we've already presented on.
And I think as we've seen with Crosswind Elementary, they are at capacity or exceeding capacity at this point. How were the new borders decided on? Why was the decision made to split a neighborhood into different schools? Why is redistricting necessary when none of the schools are at capacity?
Again, similar answer. As far as splitting neighborhoods, we've tried to minimize the number of families that would be affected. So that did change some of the boundaries.
Why is rezoning splitting neighborhoods, and more importantly, why does it keep changing?
So we have talked about, like I said, the rezoning committee has talked about numerous different things, but we're forwarding one proposal to the board.
This says current rezoning covers apartments mostly, not permanent homes. How are you rezoning to maintain a balance?
I think we've already addressed that. All right, ask me that question again.
Says the current rezoning process covers all the apartments mostly and not many permanent homes. How are you rezoning to maintain a balance?
Oh, balance between apartments and houses. So the committee looked at just looked at the areas, the contiguous areas, and selected the section south of East Shelby to attend Sycamore, I guess is what that is referring to.
Why don't you move optional programs such as preschool to your underutilized schools?
Well, we have moved some programs.
I have a question. First, I would really appreciate you all taking so much time in explaining the public everything. But all the questions that the parents or the team members are asking, I'm listening the same answer from your side, basically. From please put yourselves in our shoes. Think how a parent thinks. Think how a homeowner in Collierville thinks. Think in those lines and address those questions in a different way. I'm seeing only one perspective that you're seeing from the Collierville school side. But think as a common man and see how it is for their kids and for their families. So I would just like to say that.
Just one point
It's
I
the
want
same
to
answer that
add.
I've been hearing.
Thank you.
One point I want to add is the last 5 years, we had 2 years of COVID. So it's not the normal 5 years that we're talking about. I just want a careful consideration for, it's not a normal 5 years.
Sure.
We
Thank you.
COVID, the kids had to undergo so many things.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a few more questions.
Think about the elementary school kids emotionally and psychologically how they will be affected. See, especially the Shilling Farms Elementary, that is the 2020 starting school year. That is the newly established school. So the kids are like they have some expectations. This is my mother's school. They are treating their home school as their mother, so biological mother. Separating those children from to the rezoning, how psychologically they will be affected. They are telling, Amma, I'm going to miss my mother's school. They are telling. So you are telling the rezoning only from your perspective. Think about the student's psychological, emotional.
Thank you.
Not addressed at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. It says, how do you expect third graders who endured the brunt of COVID to rebound from another disruption in their elementary education?
That's similar comment. The comments that we've just had about COVID being difficult for children.
What impact will new rezoning have on bus transportation and logistics?
So we actually have our bus transportation supervisor here somewhere, but in any case, all of that is being looked at, and so we will, the transportation would be worked out, of course, that we would provide transportation as we always do. Now that is a fair point. That is a fair point. We are working on that.
Kids don't get home till 5:30 sometimes. What are you going to do? My child is not going to get home that late. I refuse to have him ride that bus because the kids are getting home so late.
Sure.
We've got other things to do.
It is fair.
Worse, you're going to have kids getting home at midnight.
It is fair that we have had our share of difficulties with Durham transportation, and I can tell you that we are having some serious discussions with them, and things are improving. They're not where they need to be yet, but they are improving, and we're going to continue. We're going to continue to work with them to improve those services. Go ahead.
Why are the same neighborhoods targeted again for rezoning? And how do you expect parents to get multiple kids to different schools at the same time? Why would a well-established neighborhood be divided into separate school zones, but the area closer to the school relocated within the farther one is safe? So a couple of questions. Why are the same neighborhoods targeted again for rezoning? Are we only, I'm not sure which neighborhood we're talking about, unless it's, are we talking about Fleming? Are we talking about the fact that it was, at one point Sycamore covered the entire south part of Collierville, but when Schilling opened, it split the Sycamore zone in half, and so 400 students were rezoned, but they were given the option to remain, for example, at Sycamore. So, as Dr. Lilly said, it's been 6 years since rezoning. No student that experienced rezoning last time is being rezoned again. Yes, it is true that some neighborhoods are being looked at again because of their location, contiguous with the Sycamore attendance zone, but no student is having to be rezoned 2 times. Why would a well-established neighborhood be divided into separate school zones and the area closer to the school be relocated with the farther one safe? Once again, I'm not exactly sure which locations we're talking about, but
so that area, the north parts that has been excluded from rezoning, that is closer to Crosswind. And if the addition is added on to Crosswind, then at some point they probably will face rezoning to Crosswind.
So y'all are making future plans to rezone again?
It remains to be seen. I mean, it is something, we've been up front. It's something that we look at every year.
So then our neighborhood might actually go to the same school again? Or, what was the reason between splitting an entire neighborhood that's been established for over 20 years that already goes to school together? The bus drives down Surrey Oaks and then will stop at West Powell and keep driving down the neighborhood that they've still picked up kids in the past to go to Bailey Station. Like, you're just gonna drive past the kids that they're picking up right now and just leave them.
Again, sure. So what we did, we looked at the numbers, the impact on the utilization capacity. We tried to minimize the number of families that would be affected, but we also had an eye toward the future as far as if an addition was added to Crosswind, the possible implications of that in the future.
Okay, so you're just gonna keep splitting the neighborhood and sending us different places?
Again, that is the proposal at this point.
will students be required to go to the school for which they are zoned? By policy, yes, unless the board accepts a recommendation to allow those rising fourth graders to remain at their school. Yes, the policy says that the superintendent will enforce the attendance zones. Based on frequently asked questions from Collierville Schools, question number 4, what were the findings of MGT Consulting that are necessitating rezoning? Please explain the 3 points described, as I don't see the same results. Plus, I think this might have been done so that the board made this decision. I don't see an increase of 1,200 students in the rezoned school. Also, I don't see the 61% that support the rezoning. I don't know what the 1,200 students is referring to.
Yeah, so in the presentation, I pointed out the MGT data and recommendations.
It says, how can dividing a neighborhood be justified when it only equates to about 20 students?
Again, we looked at capacity and numbers and try to minimize the number of people that we would have to move to accomplish the goals to rebalance.
Says, does the proposal consider that some of the proposed rezone areas are the same neighborhoods that were rezoned 6 years ago, and this rezoning will adversely affect the same neighborhood repeatedly because of their location? Now, once again, I assume we're talking about the Fleming, probably the Schilling Farms zone. So, yes, we did talk about that. We talked with Principal Reagan about that, and her absolute willingness and desire to embrace that community and welcome them back to Sycamore. Of course, it'll be different students, because as we said, no student that was rezoned the last time will be rezoned again this time. And it says, this neighborhood repeatedly adversely affected because of their location. As we kind of mentioned, there are no neighborhoods that are exempt from rezoning, and they are strongly impacted by their location. If they are contiguous with another school boundary, they are more likely to be rezoned than an area that is not contiguous with an existing school boundary. It says, why not direct new and upcoming residents to schools where there is unused capacity? It says Schilling still has 59 unused capacity, and you can remove other district students who study to move out of their respective school zone.
So we have talked about the difficulty in moving new residents.
Why the established communities, teachers, and kids are being pushed out of Schilling Farms, which is affecting their investment in Collierville. Why are single-family homes the major target?
We have talked about that.
I think we addressed that before about the proximity to the contiguous zone, that in order to rezone to Sycamore, we wouldn't go inside of the Schilling Farms and take an area that is not contiguous with Sycamore. The geographic location is one of the primary considerations that the policy dictates to us. It says why the established communities are being pushed out of Schilling Farms. As a result, how are future communities going to reap the benefits by becoming part of Schilling Farms Elementary School's community? Not quite sure, once again, what the answer that we're looking for. Once again, geographic location is the primary consideration by policy. If it's an area that is contiguous with a zone, it is going to be targeted for rezoning before a non-contiguous neighborhood would be looked at. Why are incoming future students not being sent to schools at lower capacity? You know, once again, I think the difficulty of taking certain homes, and plucking individual homes out and sending them across boundary lines into other schools would not be feasible given our transportation budget or our policy on attendance zones. Does the school board communicate with Collierville Building Committee to advise how full our schools are and that building more homes is not helpful?
I do not believe that they do. No, the school board does not have regular meetings with the town. The town's planner is, we do actually work with the town's planner so the school board doesn't, but the school system does. We do, every year we do the reports and look at the data, and we do share that with the town planner. So yes and no, not the school board, but the school district.
Isn't helping, this is communication that y'all need to have with the
years. After 5 years. Good spot on objection, after 5 years.
Yeah.
You guys are the foundation for all these parents. You're our voice. But you're not doing anything to stop the snowball getting out of control.
Thank you for that comment.
And why are these not, the new emerging subdivisions cannot be zoned to the school, which is under capacity, right? That would solve the problem.
What was the first part of your question?
So the new subdivisions that are emerging, can't we not zone them to the school? So that they don't have this disruptive relationship, both from a PTA perspective as well as a student perspective.
Again, the difficulty is not being contiguous zones, because you've got to keep the zones all together for transportation purposes and other purposes.
What was MGT's consultancy fee? Mr. Doherty, do you remember what the cost of MGT's study was? I said about $150,000 for the year-long study. Like I said, they made several visits here. They conducted public sessions with us. They held a series of video conferences with us, worked with our planner, worked with the town to gather data. As I said, it was not a fly-by-night operation at all. They've actually consulted with many school districts in Tennessee, quite frankly. Yeah, facility assessment was a huge part of that as well. Yeah, capacity is the problem. If we keep the same students and any extra be transferred to other schools, like to Sycamore. We've talked again, once transferring students across attendance boundaries is not something that is practiced in our school district. If Crosswinds addition is approved, will there be another redistricting when complete?
Remains to be seen, but it's very possible that it could. Probably would at some point. Not necessarily at the moment that it is constructed, but at some point it probably would.
It says, what consideration, if any, was given to the number of Collierville residents that enroll their children in private schools or home schools on the projected growth in Collierville's student population? Once again, I don't know the science behind it, but that is always taken into account, historical. We have access to databases of students that are zoned here that don't attend, or that live here that don't attend our schools. And as I said, the analysis has been spot on for several years in our annual projections. Why did the school's population get so bad? Who let this happen? People moved to Collierville because of the schools. I remember when I was a young teacher in about 1997, sitting at the DAC, Powell Road Gymnasium, and I remember Herman Wright Cox, who was the mayor, who looked out over all the teachers and said, y'all are doing too good a job. I'm going to have to get Mr. Llewellyn to knock out this wall and expand this gymnasium, because if we keep growing at this rate, this gymnasium is not going to hold all the teachers, that are here. So I think it has been a supply and demand. People want to move to Collierville for the schools. As he said, we have 10 outstanding schools, 9 brick and mortar schools plus a virtual school. People want to get into our schools. I'll address something that's uncomfortable. That people that don't live in our area, that will do anything possible to get into our schools. Shared residency, unofficial documentation, to get in. We fight it every day. Mr. Field deals with it every day, and his staff deals with it every day, trying to find non-residents that are in our schools. But people, they want to come here. They're willing to pay top dollar. I don't want to speak on behalf of the mayor or the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, but there's a huge bond on this building that we're sitting in now that they're committed to for 40 years to pay for it. They need to have steady streams of income. You want good parks, you want good police protection, you want good roads, you want economic development. I do too. A comment was made, think about this as a Collierville homeowner. Dr. Lilly and I are Collierville homeowners. We are residents here. I have lived in Collierville for 28 years. I've seen it grow. I started teaching in 1995 at Collierville High School. I have seen the explosion of Collierville. It's been phenomenal to see. I've seen education change with that as well. This is actually a good problem to have. If people were fleeing our schools and we were having to consolidate, like they're doing in, for example, in the city of Memphis, in Memphis Shelby County schools, we'd be sitting in this, auditorium talking about rezoning for downsizing, purposes. This is a great problem, for us to have, but we have zero control over granting building permits. We have good communication with the town. We have a great relationship with them. As we said, the vice mayor of the town was on the rezoning committee, who also happens to be a realtor. So is certainly aware of all of the demand, that is here. So we're doing the very best that we know how to do to balance growth with innovation, to provide great schools to everyone, whether they are a homeowner or whether they're an apartment dweller here. And your presence here, your passion, here tonight is all part of what makes this, the very best school system that's around.
We've had this problem for many years. This has been a problem for many years of the town growth. And here we are, we're at the head of it, and you're saying that Cardinal's doing the best that they can do. This proposal is not the best that we can do. I'm sorry. How many architects have y'all contacted about adding on to each elementary school? I mean, you're not giving but two options, and that's it. And basically, Dr. Lilly, you told us, suck it up. This whole time you're talking to us. And you're saying, this is a problem that you're gonna have to deal with. And I'm sitting here listening to this, and it's not the best. If this is the best that Cardinal can do, then there's better out there. This is set. There should be more options. You should be telling us we have this architect, we have had them evaluate every school, because it's not always about building out. It's a lot cheaper to build up. And there are schools that have 3 stories. It's out there, there are options out there, but it's disappointing that we've gone through this many years, and this is the best that we have. This is all that you're offering us, and that's it. And there's no other options that apparently you guys have gone out and looked at. There should be.
So let me address that a little bit. I apologize if I have conveyed any message that you're just going to have to suck it up. Again, the committee was charged with coming up with a proposal. That's what we've done. This is an opportunity for feedback, and we're getting that feedback. But to address your idea about building up or building out or however it goes, construction right now is extremely expensive. Again, that would be an option. But and I told you when I did the presentation, I really thought that we would have to build a new school at the inception of the study. But the study came back and said, you don't have to, because you've got space if you've got the kids in the right spot. So that's how we've gotten to this point.
Adding to that, what everybody's saying here, right? We are here to discuss our questions and concerns, and you're answering. You're mentioning the word called proposal, but the answers or options we are getting is not like a proposal. It's like set in stone. Take it. This is how we are doing it. How you're announcing or how we are doing it here. So I mean, the majority of in fact that parents are getting here, they are really tied to the school. They help grow with the school, with the students, adding with the community and values. So we are not listening in that tone. It's a proposal, but it's not a proposal. It's like set in stone.
What we
That's
are
how
yet to
everybody
hear,
is listening to.
what we are yet to hear from you is how this is going to be a partnership, right? We have not heard the word partnership yet. We have just heard we are going to make tweaks. Tweaks sounds like minor adjustments. They don't sound like revisiting the proposal, looking it from a different perspective. As somebody said, thinking it from a parent's perspective. Yes, you are more educators, you are the foundation, as somebody had said, but then how about putting it in our shoes of how we are invested in our communities? We talk about contiguous boundaries. I mean, the person over here, she was just saying, contiguous boundary, it's like just the next street. I mean, that's a contiguous boundary. So if we are definition of contiguous boundary, then you are not adhering to what you are saying. You know, you gotta listen to, you know, sometimes it's like just walking the talk.
Sure.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. So, I mean, no disrespect.
Okay.
This is a great conversation that we are having, but like as we are seeing, there's a lot of frustration. And the frustration is coming from the way we are not given enough access to communicate. This is a good forum for us to have communication. The communication has to be two-way street. It cannot be just like, here's I'm going to do a presentation, here's what we are going to understand, and please write it. And you are doing a fantastic job, you know, Mr. Jeff, but then we are really, you know, scratching our head here trying to understand how am I supposed to express my concerns by articulating my thoughts. And so we have actually, you know, put a petition out there, and we have so far collected 94 signatures. And, you know, I would just, you know, use this opportunity and just ask everyone to go ahead and sign up as many petitions as possible, and let's constructively, you know, try to use this as an opportunity to solve this problem, you know, using some more creativity rather than just because a consulting firm said that, you know, you don't have to worry about a new school and you can rebalance it, but then rebalancing is not really going to solve, you know, and give the right answer. So,
Thank you for those comments. We have heard that you are craving the opportunity for actually addressing, having public comments, so I appreciate that.
I think we have about 3 more questions. We're going to try to finish these 3 questions.
Yeah. Okay.
I was trying to be kind about like holding my hand up, but since you're not going to call me, I'll just stop. So I submitted the question about grandfathering kids in, and that's not going to be an overall, but that would give the next 5 years to slowly correct this problem. The projection you gave was 5 years, being over 100% most these schools. 5 years, that would correct the problem, give you additional 5 years to expand in these schools or do whatever you needed to do, and to also reduce the psychological damage it does on these children having to move away from their friends or move away from a school they know. Collierville especially has this family house system. You're moving out of the house system and everything else. It's like we've dedicated so much time and money to these schools and these programs for our children, and you're moving them out without any question. If you really wanted to work with us as a community, you would look at what we're saying and grandfather our children in and give us more time, give y'all more time to think about how to correct this problem correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
The entire PTA board is now actually getting rezoned. The last 6 years, every single president that was in the SFES PTA is getting rezoned to Sycamore. We built a community, and from what I'm hearing from you is, your child is not getting affected as long as, you know, they started kindergarten 6 years ago, you know, as one child. But we are talking about families. We're now talking about our younger sibling not reaping the effects of the community that we built, not being able to go to the same school that their elder sibling is going to. The community that we built as multiple families, we joined together and brought the school to where it is today. As a new school when it started, you started with nothing. And we brought it to where it is now as one of the top schools, being equal to the other 5 elementary schools that are there in the system. So I request you that you consider that the community that we built takes priority over the rezoning.
Thank you. Thank you.
One other thing that we may have failed to mention, this session is being videotaped, and it will be available for all of the rezoning committee members as well as the board members to be able to view afterwards. So they are getting it, they will have the opportunity, if they choose to take it, to watch it, but also all your submitted feedback is going to be shared with them as well.
There are 19 PTA members on the board for Shilling Farms, just from Fleming Gardens. Just from Fleming Gardens, 19 people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be recorded.
Why can't portable buildings be used to expand instead of displacing families who've already had children at certain schools? There are schools that these children have grown comfortable with and developed friends at. We kind of talked about the challenge of portable buildings, the expense, the logistics, and some of our schools wouldn't support those based on their footprint. It says, can current students and siblings not stay at their current schools and this only affect new households? We've already addressed that. And then Finally, it says, why is Valleywood split and only the middle rezoned? The farthest end is not rezoned. Children will walk past the middle houses to walk to CES, while the middle will wait for the bus. And that's one that perhaps I think even one of our rezoning members after the fact wrote to me and said, you know, the more I looked at the map, I don't know that we drew the line exactly right. We may need to take in more of that neighborhood to rezone. So we'll take that and we'll look at that as well.
Is that all the
I think
questions?
that,
All right.
and that concludes our questions.
All right, so some final thoughts, and keep in mind, this is one of two public meetings, but some final thoughts. All this feedback that we've got, all the things that have been submitted through the online form and the QR code, those will definitely be read, they will be considered, and they will be shared with the Board of Education. Do keep an eye on our rezoning website, the FAQs, but also any different information that comes up, it'll come up there first. And our next public meeting will be here on November 28th, so in a couple of weeks. I do thank you for your attendance. I appreciate your respectfulness this evening. I understand that you're passionate about this, and one of the reasons why Collierville Schools is great is because of all the parental support. So we do appreciate that. Finally, this is the QR code, and I hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving break. Thank you. Sure.
This is like your last act, right? You're retiring at the end of this year, correct?
That is correct, yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. This is a huge thing that's fallen on your shoulders. I totally get that. This is stressful for you. Who is coming in after you?
That remains to be seen. The board is doing a search.
Needs to be here. Because they're the ones that are gonna watch all of this cycle, to follow through. It's unfair for us to walk blindly into 2024 and not know who's gonna be walking with us and be our voice.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Yeah. All right, thank you all very much. Have a good evening, have a great Thanksgiving, and I imagine we will see you here in a couple of weeks.